why Britain should renationalise its railways. It was a mistake, no matter who's making profit out of railways, to turn railways it started out as private railways and it became nationalised. And then Beecham he privatised it, took away steam, fair enough, because it was dirty and polluting, and he nationalised it and privatised it, and then made it so expensive the people can't use it, so they're forced into motor cars. People are actually forced into motor cars in Britain, and now they're getting punished by how the price of gas is going to go up and up and up, because that's part of the process, to try and force people into electric cars, which then have got a real problem, because living in a flat, or if you can't recharge these cars, you're suddenly confronted with a real problem. If you've got the convenience and the finances, etc., to buy an electric car, then okay, but if you haven't got the means to recharge them because you live in a flat, or there's problems recharging on the way home, and all those things will go, the downside of electric cars are as yet are far greater than the upsides if it's just a means of transport. Forget the climate change thing and all that. As a means of transport, as yet, yes, if you can afford one, good to go and get one. But the point about it is, I've just watched a show called Harry's Garage. Harry's a brilliant man, and I really respect him, and he explained things beautifully. But what he didn't seem to take into consideration it's transport. What is the problem? Not cars, or climate change, or CO2, or electricity, or renewables. It's a simple act of transporting people from A to B, especially when it comes to getting to work. Now, it seems to me there are people with designs on selling millions of electric cars. It's because the big idea is to replace or compete with fossil fuel cars, because everyone's got it in their head, because people have got rich, or companies got prestige and rich out of building cars, then someone else is going to replace those cars with another car, which is an electric car, which also is individualizing the costs of the input, if you like, the cost to individuals of running a car is still exchanged from the petrol car or the fossil fuel car to the electric car. There's still cost there. There's no escaping the costs of running a motor vehicle, whether it's electric. There's no escaping the fact that, as Harry explains, there's no such thing as a clean vehicle. There's no emissions-free vehicle. It just does not exist. And this is why it would be a very intelligent thing to do for the British government to begin to nationalise its railway, even if it's sections at a time, a piece at a time, and begin to make the system automatic. It's like a shuttle services, what run with some more modern railway systems, than having everyone suddenly confronted with this. And it's already, it's a bit late to do this, but having suddenly everyone confronted with massive fuel bills at this time, just after COVID has damaged the economy, is obviously a very bad thing for everyone's economy, and it's on the mood of the people, and it's going to cause awful lot of trouble. So an emergency response would be to nationalise the railway, regardless that says buy them out, because the return is getting people on the trains in a way they can afford it by sliding the scale of the cost of getting on a ticket. If you can slide the scale of costs of getting on a train, so it becomes ubiquitous. And so if you're on a lower wage, you pay a low amount for the amount of miles you travel. It's very simple to understand, and that's not being socialistic. I'm not a communist or socialist. I'm just saying that's only fair to the people. You've got to be fair and have justice to the people. You can't just suddenly make sure that only the rich can afford to travel in cars and planes and trains, and the poor are left to suffer stranded at the side of the road with no way they can afford to recharge their car or buy a new car or refuel their petrol car. because cars cars have become a habit. We all use them. I use mine to a minimum amount. I use electric bike most of the time. I just use my electric bike to get around to the short journeys of shopping, because electric bikes are the answer to electric transport. And if government's really, really serious about this reducing CO2 for whatever reason that is, a politically correct reason more than anything else, and it would be far wiser to encourage people into electric bikes, especially in cities like London, where electric bike will perfectly do most of the distances within London. It may not suit the super businessmen and people like that, but the average person, electric bike would actually free up the traffic, stop pollution. It would be much more sustainable and far quicker and cheaper to do, and actually a delightful way to get around the city. Electric bike is a very delightful way to get around anyway, and that's one solution. But that and nationalising the rail system will be a far more sustainable, economically sustainable means of going forward to combat climate change, if that's your aim, to make the people live on the planet in a much more sustainable way, will be to improve the rail system out of hand by having a look at automated shuttle systems and automated systems, so that you can have light rails running on constantly all the time if they're automated. And that makes a lot more sense than having big diesel trains belting up down the country or on electrified lines. But nonetheless, you're having all these big and heavy trains that are very, very expensive to run, mostly because people make a lot of profit out of them. Profit's fine, but profit has become the dirty word, if you like. Profit is now the cause of big pollution. There's no doubt about it. Take some of the reasons to make profit out and you take some of the pollution out. And one would be to do that is to buy back and nationalise the British rail system as much as it can be. Even if it's over a 10-year period, you nationalise it over a period. And then you adjust the fares, like I said, so that it's affordable for the average person on the average wage, low average wage, so that is then sustainable in their case financially. Sustainability isn't just about sustaining the planet, it's sustaining the people so they can live in a reasonable situation regardless of the climate. Because if you're not acting in regards to the people's sustainability for their economic and financial situation, paying their rents, buying food, looking after their kids, you're not handling climate change in a responsibly sustainable manner at all. All it does is sustain the profits of the super wealthy, and it allows the wealthier people to get involved with all this alternative technology, but everyone else is left behind. It's not a socially sustainable system. It's not a socially sustainable system. It might be ecologically, and that's disputable whether it's ecologically sustainable either. So nationalising the British railway system is something that the government ought to consider and get on with it very quickly and deal with the situation pragmatically and logically and rationally, so the people have got transport, because transport's the problem, not CO2. You've got to solve the transport problem, and then you can solve the CO2 problem if that's your guide. But there's something has got to give. Getting people back on the trains. The trains in England were a wonderful service everyone could afford to use. They got privatised and it's gone over the show, and it's ridiculous. So people can't use it. People put off use it. But if you nationalise it, you can put more trains on. You can run it in a more automated system. You can get people on and off the trains quicker, and you get a lot more people on the trains, and you take people off the road. And if that's not your aim, to reduce traffic, then the old model for sustainability doesn't make sense. sustaining people's living standards by not coercing them into a situation where they can't afford to put food on the table because they're paying for transport because they're stuck to going to the job they've got. If that's the idea of a policy by left or right in any government, then it's a failure from a political perspective and from a social perspective and from an economic perspective. And it's also a failure to look at the ecology or eco-sustainable philosophy, like it's lacking the main part of the conversation. What happens to all the poor people as the rich take advantage of all the new bejingos and jingoism what's going on to solve with climate change, because they're the only ones who can afford it.